So the new iPhones have been out for a little while now and are in the hands of millions and millions of users already. For those of us who bought the iPhone 13 Pro or 13 Pro Max, we likely did so simply because we enjoy having the newest iPhone, or don't enjoy having any pocket money, one of the two. I got it myself for review, of course, but also for the 120Hz display. It's something I've wanted on an iPhone forever, and so we've certainly waited long enough. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're aiming to take a fairly realistic view on the iPhone 13 Pro. A phone that's super expensive and overkill for the vast majority of people, but also one that is quite frankly awesome, and I'm definitely enjoying it thus far. So is it really worth buying? It's never easy to answer the question of whether or not a flagship phone of any brand is actually worth it, in part because value is difficult to properly place when prices can scale so differently across phone lineups, but also in large part because value is a concept relative to the actual person buying the phone. Someone with more spending money than another person will have a different version of worth it, simply because they can afford to pay more for less gain. And at the same time, certain feature sets may not be helpful for every single person. So for example, the iPhone 13 Pro in a future update is bringing Apple ProRes shooting, a video format that is extremely high quality and might be very useful for a media journalist or a YouTuber like me, but not so much for, say, a normal university student. For the vast majority of those looking to buy a new iPhone, the 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max are not the answers. Recently, I did an iPhone buying guide, and I said the same thing there. What most people will want to look at will be the iPhone 13 or 13 mini at $800 or $700 respectively, or if their budget is more aligned with a mid-range option, then the iPhone 11 at $500 is a pretty good deal, and this is American without a plan. Speaking in the most general terms possible, the iPhone 13 and iPhone 11 I think are the best value iPhones Apple has to offer right now, and for most people's situations, I think one of those two phones will fit really well. Apple, by pricing this phone higher and adding the whole Pro tag behind it, really is emphasizing this is the best that they have to offer, and so you would expect the quality to be in accordance with the $1,000 price tag. I have to say, after using the 13 Pro over the last little bit here, yeah, it's a $1,000 phone. This is an amazing smartphone, most definitely an iPhone, and if you're not much of an iPhone fan, you'll find lots to be annoyed by. A lot of people will always say iPhones are overpriced, but there is a reason this is the best Apple has to offer. Actually, a multitude of reasons. So why don't we start here with the design of the phone, and then we'll get to the new hardware and camera improvements, and what I really think about whether or not the iPhone 13 Pro is worth it or not. The iPhone 13 Pro is without a doubt one of the most gorgeous smartphones ever built. It shares essentially the same design with the iPhone 12 Pro, and that's fine because that was also one of the most beautiful devices ever made. The flat frosted glass surrounded by the polished stainless steel frame and flat front glass makes for a premium, comfortable, and satisfying experience. The frosted glass, I've heard people say, is slippery. I don't find it to be too bad as the stainless steel helps provide a good grip, but at the same time, I'm the kind of person who sticks to using a case for my phone because quite frankly, there's no way I wouldn't break this otherwise, or at least scratch it up to all heck. My only kind of complaint about the design is the camera bump. It's absolutely massive, like comically big. Not the biggest, but it's up there, and it's very much noticeable when first getting and using the phone. And in all fairness, it is that big because the camera lenses are big and thus provide higher quality, I would hope. So it's a trade-off I think most should be willing to make. But looking at it compared to my iPhone 11 Pro Max, this phone came out 2 years ago now, same number of lenses, and the size difference in the camera setup is absolutely absurd. I remember thinking the 11 Pro's camera was big. As for general durability, of course Apple says it's the strongest smartphone glass and whatnot like they do every year. I actually have a pretty great track record with smartphones. I've never cracked a display while I was using the phone. In fact, even in all my years of filming, I think I've cracked one display, and it was on an iPod Touch that was already broken, like it wouldn't turn on, so it wasn't a big deal. And you might be looking at this shot saying, Josh, I mean, come on, this is risky, man. Why do you always take such risks? Sometime this is gonna bite you. Well, it almost did. I actually, so when my phone was up like this, it actually ended up falling off randomly. I don't know if a gust of wind or something hit it, but it just fell and freaked me the heck out. But somehow, luckily, it didn't crack. It did chip pretty good on the bottom and on the corner. Overall, though, I'm pretty darn lucky, and it was a solid like 4-foot drop on a concrete, so I'm pretty impressed it didn't break. Not bad for an all-glass phone. Yeah, I have a screen protector, but they're not usually that helpful powerful. They're more to protect from scratches over anything else. So props to Apple for making a durable phone, and I'll be keeping my case on for the most part. Now, will this stop me from living on the edge and putting consoles like my PS5 in trees? No. Had the phone actually cracked, would I have stopped? Probably not. Hey, it looks cool, okay? Anyways, moving on. For colors, there are 4: graphite, gold, silver, and Sierra blue. The newest addition to the lineup this year being a significantly lighter shade than the Pacific blue of last year. I'm not sure if this is an unpopular or popular opinion, but personally, I'm not a big fan of this color, and the Pacific blue on the 12 Pro was easily one of my favorite colors of any smartphone period. Even if I didn't buy the 12 Pro, I went for the 12 last year, and I love that blue too. Apple likes to make these small cosmetic changes year over year to make it clear that it's a newer phone, but regardless, I like the colors here for the most part. The Sierra blue, it definitely comes down to personal taste. I went with the graphite. I think this is my first black iPhone I've actually used since my iPhone 4. I've trended towards different options in the past years. I suppose I did have the space gray iPhone 6S, if that counts, as it was the darkest option for that phone, but even so, it's nice to go back to the basics here, and I'm absolutely loving it with Apple's dark cherry MagSafe leather case that I paid way too much money for. I'm really curious to see where the design of iPhone goes from here. I can't help but feel they've hit this sweet spot. The design is this near perfect blend of the 2010 iPhone 4 with its glass and stainless steel, and then the iPhone 5 with perfectly flat edges to the point the phone can stand up on its own no problem, and it's in this like almost all in one piece. And I suppose also the frosted glass of the iPhone 11 Pro. Though if glossy is more your thing, of course you can find that on the aluminum-sided iPhone 13. Naturally, the iPhone 14 rumors are already in full swing, and it sounds like the big new improvements will be on the front more so than the back. I have read that there's a possibility of no rear camera bump. I feel like this is extremely unlikely, given how big it is this year and how camera sensors keep getting better, and thus they need to get bigger so they can take in more light. The phone would have to be significantly thicker, which might not be a bad thing if it means better battery life, but it would be pretty darn out of character for Apple. I've also read they could bring titanium to the mix instead of stainless steel, but whatever they end up doing, it's going to be hard for them to make the phone look nicer than it already does. And hey, that's a good thing. It means the 13 Pro should hold up for a long time, in not only the hardware of course, but the design too. So battery life. We'll get to the front of the device shortly, but I do need to speak on battery life because it is absolutely fantastic. The best of any smartphone I've ever used, definitely better than the iPhone 12 I was using, and even the 11 Pro Max I used before it, which was an absolute beast. And keep in mind, this is not a big phone. The other day in the evening I checked my battery life and I only had 20% remaining, which I found surprising because the battery's been so good. So I checked to see the battery stats, and turned out I actually didn't charge it the night before. I had misplaced it on my wireless charger, so it never charged. So it was at 60% when I woke up and 20% by the end of the second day of using it. It's extremely fair to say that this phone could last 2 days on a single charge even with moderate to heavy usage, though you could be cutting it a little close at the end of the second day. But I gotta imagine the Pro Max would be ridiculous. And the point is that these new iPhones are amazing battery-wise, and it feels good to be able to go out and have zero concerns for battery life. I wasn't quite that confident with my iPhone 12. I was with my 11 Pro Max, but either way, the 13 Pro is an absolute battery monster, and props to Apple for making it even better this year. Speaking of the 13 Pro Max being bigger, and it's called Max after all, let's take a look at the display, shall we? Of course, on the smaller device here, we get 6.1 inches of OLED Super Retina XDR, insert other buzzwords here, and even a now smaller notch. The 13 Pro Max in comparison is 6.7 inches, which is just massive, and too big for my unfortunately small hands. But this phone fits perfectly fine for me, just like my 12 did at the same size. The notch might be smaller, but that's not actually the main new change on the front. ProMotion is. Not promotion like in a job, but ProMotion. When I was writing my script, Google Docs kept trying to correct me. The iPhone 13 Pro has an 120Hz refresh rate display versus only 60Hz on previous iPhones. Some of the better Android flagships have had this for a little while already, and so Apple is a bit late to the party, but at least it's finally here, and it's fantastic. To put it simply, 120Hz equates to 120 frames per second, resulting in a significantly smoother experience. On the left is my iPhone 13 Pro, on the right is my iPhone 12. This was filmed at 120 frames per second and slowed down to 25% speed, and notice how much smoother the 13 Pro manages to be compared to the now choppy looking 12. Of course, 60Hz is absolutely fine, and it still looks good when you're using the phone, but that 120 does bring a whole new level of smoothness and really helps elevate the iOS experience to feel just that much faster, even if it's not not really changing much beyond the frames per second. iPad Pro has had this for a few years now, and it's something you really need to see in person to fully understand just how much better it is, but that clip I showed does at least give a pretty good indicator. And what's interesting is on the 13 Pro, the refresh rate is adaptive and can actually adjust to what's being displayed. So if you're not touching the screen and nothing's moving, it can slow itself down to as low as 10 Hz in order to save battery life. And battery life, as mentioned, is amazing, so clearly the high refresh rate doesn't seem to be hurting it in that department. It's worth noting some apps still haven't updated to take advantage of the high refresh rate, but Apple has made this fairly easy to do, and most of the big games and apps should shift over pretty soon if they haven't already. I love this screen. Of course, it's as beautiful, vibrant, and color-rich as ever, but it is the ProMotion tech that steals the spotlight this time around, and I'm very much cool with that. I've been waiting for it for years. Remember how the notch got smaller? I moved on from that pretty quickly because honestly, I don't really care. The difference is there to be sure, but it's so minuscule. I only really noticed it when initially setting up the phone, and then not again unless I was specifically thinking about it. It's nice that it's finally smaller, but it isn't a big deal, at least to me, and the supposed hole punch display coming next year will definitely be a much bigger change. Though again, and this probably is an unpopular opinion, I don't care. I've never really disliked the notch, especially compared to some people. That part of the screen to me typically isn't very useful anyways, and the notch is usually only invasive when watching video, so hole punch, notch, small notch, it doesn't really matter to me. But video does bring up this really annoying little petty complaint I have. The downside of the notch shrinking its sides is that it also got very so slightly taller, which means when watching video at an 18:9 aspect ratio, which is what my YouTube videos always are, the notch just very slightly digs into the side. It's subtle, this is definitely a petty complaint, but it also definitely sets off my non-existent OCD, and it makes the phone literally unusable. I am joking, but it's one of those things, you know, it's like, why? With the design, I of course covered the gargantuan camera bump, so why don't we take a closer look at that? Every year, Apple loves to tout how this is their best smartphone camera yet, so let's see if it's truly as great as they claim this time around. Spoiler, it kind of is. The camera improvements this year, especially with video, is tough to ignore for even the most dedicated of Apple critics. The portrait mode is of course better, as it is every year with every new iPhone, but holy moly, these photos are just amazing. I'll admit I don't take enough portrait mode photos, and my iPhone 12 did a great job, so did my 11 Pro Max. But just going around and taking portrait mode photos again a lot, this phone just does such a great job. This here is my mini Dachshund Cola. Dachshund, Dachshund, I don't know, people call it different things, but she's the absolute sweetest little dog ever, and she very generously volunteered to be the model for today's photo shoot. At first glance, these photos are amazing. Look a little closer, you might notice that some of her long hair is cut off a bit, kinda just a typical portrait mode thing. It's been a problem forever, but luckily it isn't too obvious if you don't point it out. With people, it's probably gonna be at its best. Honestly though, people suck. I'd rather take pictures of my dog. The bokeh drop off the further her sausage body is away from the camera is so natural looking, just like it would be on a high quality DSLR. Of course, iPhones have had this for a while, so it's nothing new, but it just blows me away how good and how natural this photo looks at first glance. The depth of field and just everything, it's so beautiful. There's almost always a little flaw with portrait mode photos. You need to take quite a few, I find, to get a good one, but when you get that good one, it's so good. All in all, love the portrait mode photos as always, and it's safe to say that it's better than ever. Plus, you can take portraits at 3x zoom if you want to now. Yeah, 3x zoom. There are 3 cameras. First off, you've got the 3x zoom telephoto lens. This used to be 2x. They've changed it this year, and I'm a fan of that. I think that while 2x might be more useful in more situations, giving 3x does give a much greater range of what kind of photos you can take. And it also kind of allows for some macro shooting, which of course has been around forever on different phones, but it looks really good here with Apple's camera tech. It's very impressive. I'm not any kind of photography expert, but I think they did a good job here. Then you of course have the normal wide lens. This is 1x zoom, and this is always going to be the best camera lens. It's going to be the highest quality. It's really good. Images are crispy, they're sharp, they're colored naturally. HDR is fantastic, and while all this does apply to the other lenses, again, if you compare the 3, it also tends to have more detail. So this is the one you're going to want to use for most pictures of people. And for the last lens, we get ultra wide at 0.5x zoom, so it pulls out even wider than the already wide lens. As always, like this one too, it's great for landscapes. This one is on the regular iPhone 13 with its 2 lenses. That one just doesn't have the telephoto. Not a lot to say about the ultra wide because we We've seen it all before. Night shooting is pretty darn good, though as always, taking photos in low light conditions is something that's probably best to be avoided if possible. But the 13 Pro does a pretty good job with this. For really dark conditions will never look too great, but it's shocking to see how well the phone manages to light the subject anyways. Overall, the camera setup here is brilliant and one of the best of any smartphone ever made. Is it the best? That's not for me to say, and of course you'll get people arguing about it as the new Pixel comes out, and other great phones with great cameras, and honestly, I don't think it matters. Whether you're getting this iPhone or the new Pixel or the new Galaxy or whatever, smartphone cameras have gotten so ridiculously good, you're pretty much set whichever path you choose. Okay, so now video. As always, it's going to beat any Android competition. iPhone's always been ahead of the game in this department. We get cinematic mode video this year, which is basically just portrait mode for video, and it's interesting. I can definitely see how cool it can be, and in the right situations with ideally pretty still moving subjects, it produces a really nice shot. But there's also no question that it's pretty early on for the feature, as it struggles to properly focus in on any subject with even a bit of movement, or if it's not super clear where it is from the background. What you really need is a subject that's far away from the background and properly stands out, and then it has no problem kind of focusing on it. And you can lock the autofocus as well, so that's probably where you could get some really cool footage. And of course you can edit the amount of blur and all those sorts of things. So the cinematic video is on the Pro and also the 13, but only coming to the Pro phones is ProRes, where the phone will be able to record in a much higher quality, gathering significantly more data. This allows you to do color correction and different things in your Final Cut editor. It just gives you a lot more control over the video, and it's not available yet, but it should be pretty soon here with a future update. To record 4K ProRes, you need at least 256 gigs of space, as it takes up a ton of data. Apparently a single minute of 4K video will cost you 6 gigs of storage. I'm looking forward to this feature a lot, but it's probably something that most people won't end up using because they shouldn't. Unless you use Final Cut or are into color correction or any kind of videography, it's not going to be too useful for you. But overall here, the video is better than ever, and there's a lot of reasons to be more and more excited for the future. Apple just keeps killing it when it comes to video. But that's probably enough of the camera. Fantastic, amazing, brilliant as always. There are many words I could use, and if the 3-lens setup or video recording interests you, there are legitimate reasons to be looking at the 13 Pro over the regular 13. What's the reason not to? Well, otherwise they're very similar, especially with the hardware. A15 Bionic chipset in each iPhone 13 device, though the Pro models do have 6 GB of RAM versus 4 in the normal 13. Not that it makes much real difference. This may seem like a low number of RAM for some Android users, but keep in mind Apple is able to fine-tune their own software to their own hardware, and so the optimization is much greater versus Android, where you need to kind of add more RAM to brute force the same level of speed because you can't have the same level of optimization. The A15 Bionic is just yet another iteration on top of Apple's ridiculously powerful smartphone chipsets. I'm not even going to bother with the benchmarks. There are tons of speed tests out there if you're interested. This phone is just blazing fast. The real benefit to Apple software too is that it's going to stay fast like this for many years to come. Apple is absurd when it comes to keeping phones supported by updates, with the iPhone 6s from 2015 still running iOS 15 today and honestly not even feeling too slow while doing it. Basically, the 13 Pro is extremely speedy, and it's gonna stay that way for the indefinite future. Is the 13 Pro or the 13 Pro Max truly worth buying for most people? Of course not. It's expensive, it's overkill, and the iPhone 13 mini at $700 or the regular 13 at $800 provides significantly better bang for your buck with most of the same features and a decently reduced cost. The 13 is the high-end iPhone I'll be recommending over the next year, just as last year I recommended the iPhone 12 over the 12 Pro, and next year I'm probably going to recommend the 14 over the 14 Pro. But if you're the kind of person who wants those extra camera features, that 3x zoom, the ProRes video recording, maybe you want the extra power and the 6 gigs of RAM, maybe you prefer the more premium frosted glass design, or likely most appealing, the absolutely buttery smooth 120Hz ProMotion display, then the iPhone 13 Pro is for you if you consider yourself a pro. Okay, that's a little bit on the nose, but you get the idea. If you want those pro features, you gotta pay for it, but you get those features. I hesitate to call this phone good value because I find it hard to consider any smartphone $1,000 or even around there good value, but for what it is, it's certainly one of the best flagships on the market, and even more importantly, it's the best iPhone. For some people, that's what they want, the best iPhone. Something that'll do them well with all the features available and the best possible performance and experience. The 13 Pro and 13 Pro Pro Max are phones that I know users will love, and I'm already loving it. This is a premium pro iPhone flagship experience, just like I paid for, and it's hard to ask for much more than that. Is it really worth buying for most? Definitely not. But if you can afford it and want it, yeah, I would say it's worth it. And also, you know, your money, do what you want with it. Enjoy your brand new iPhone. And with that, I think I'm right about done here. Maybe I'll do another video when the ProRes shooting comes out, or some kind of updated review to talk more about my experience. We'll see how things go. But if you found this video interesting or helpful, maybe hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. You can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at 91_tech if you'd like to for some reason. And we do have a Discord link, as always, in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.